In this video, we're going to take a look at Jackery's brand new HomePower 3000, a lightweight, quiet backup solution with some surprisingly unique features I haven't seen on a unit this size and at this price. Now, before I jump in, I do want to acknowledge that these type of devices are at a price point that's high for my community, and I'm always mindful of that when I do these types of videos on my channel. I do, however, know that some people are looking for a backup power solution, and this one has some unique features that will allow you to actively save money on your electricity bill each month and also serve as an introductory solid home backup power source. So here's what we're going to cover in this video: what makes this unique, specs and features, test results, ROI, and I'll give you my final thoughts. Now, this unit has a lot to unpack, so let's go ahead and jump in. What makes this unique? Now, typically I start my reviews by going over the specs and the test results, which I'll cover more in a moment. If you'd like to jump ahead to those sections, I'm going to put that time here on the side of the screen. Instead, I'd like to address what makes this unit unique. There are some fascinating things about it, so I would encourage you to watch this section first. If you've watched my channel for any length of time, you know I've reviewed a lot of solar generators, and I think I've tested nearly every consumer solar generator on the market, big and small, over the last 7 years, so I've got a solid understanding of how they stack up against each other. Admittedly, lately, I feel like I'm on repeat sometimes reviewing these types of units as they have so many similarities, but this one does some things at a price point I haven't really quite seen before, which I'll explain. Okay, so who is this system designed for and what makes it unique? First, it's designed for people that want a backup power source in their home. And secondly, it's built in a practical way that can help you save money on your electricity bill. And third, it's built for individuals that want a backup power source without breaking the bank. Let me explain how it addresses these three issues. First, let's talk about the backup power option. The United States power grid is becoming less reliable, and the average power outage in the United States is 12 hours. Our aging grid faces many challenges in the coming years between an increase in extreme weather events and the well-documented increase in AI and EV power consumption demands. So you have a few options. You can get a regular gas generator at your local hardware store, but they require maintenance, and you have to be there to start them up when the power goes down, and they run on a finite fuel source, gas, propane, or diesel. But you don't have to deal with those issues with a system like this. You can either have it on standby or plug your devices right into it and then plug it into a wall socket, thus pulling power from the grid and sending it directly to the devices, aka pass-through power. If the grid were to go down in this scenario, it can switch over to the battery in under 20 milliseconds, acting as a UPS system. Now, additionally, you can plug it into solar panels to provide additional power to extend how long you can power the devices. If you're familiar with units like this, they're often referred to as solar generators, and this is nothing new and is common in the industry. But what makes this unique is the next feature. All right, secondly, let's talk about how it can help you save money on your electricity bill. And also be sure to stick around to the section later entitled ROI, in which we'll talk about some of this in more detail. But let's start by explaining the cost-saving features this offers with two different approaches. The first approach is for those paying more for electricity during peak hours. Some companies, they charge more during evening hours when demand is the highest. Where I live, from 4 to 9 p.m. each evening, the electricity more than doubles what the normal rate is. And this is a time of day when people come home from work and everyone starts using electricity, and the demand on the grid is high. So with a unit like this, you can use it for what's referred to as power arbitrage or peak shaving during these peak hours. This involves charging this unit from the grid when rates are lower, like overnight, and then using the power saved in the batteries during peak hours from 4 to 9 p.m. to power devices plugged into it. Obviously, you can do this with any solar generator, but with the Jackery app, I can configure it to stop accepting power from the grid between 4 and 9 p.m. each evening and only provide power from the batteries in this unit. This way, I don't have to come and disconnect it manually from the grid each day at 4 p.m. It automates this process. Then overnight, the Jackery will automatically charge from the grid when the rates are low. And I can configure all of this in the app. Now, if you were to repeat this daily, you can save money on your electricity bill as you're buying power when it's cheap and powering lines from the battery when power is expensive. And this system will automate all of this after you configure it. Now, obviously, setting this up to connect to your appliances could be challenging if they're far away from where you put the Jackery, but let me show you another option to connect it to devices in your home. As shown here, I have these plugins that accept both 120 and 240 volt. These are connected to what's called a critical load panel. I can connect the Jackery to the 120 volt plug-in with the 30 amp plug-in on the front of the Jackery. I can then plug the Jackery into a wall socket, which is connected to the grid to send power to the Jackery. So during the day, the power will pass through the Jackery from the grid, aka pass-through power, powering my critical load panel, which powers items like my refrigerator, lights, and other essential items. Then from 4 to 9 p.m. each evening, when electric rates are higher, I can configure the Jackery through the app to stop pulling power from the grid and will just send power from the batteries I charged when the electricity rates were lower. By the way, a critical load panel is a secondary, typically smaller subpanel designed for essential items you'd want to power if the grid were to go down. It's not designed to power big items like an air conditioner, but just the essential items you'd want to power if the grid were to go down. If you have an electrician install one of these critical load panels for you, let them know what lines you would want to power if the grid were to go down. But if you live in an area where they don't charge more during peak hours and you still want to save money, there's an option on the app called self-powered. With this option, you connect the unit to both solar and the grid. The way it works is that the items plugged into the Jackery, like your refrigerator or other items you'd plug into it, will receive power from the Jackery while it's being charged by solar until the battery drains down to a percentage that you define in the app. For example, if you don't want the battery to drop below 50%, you can set the minimum battery charge status to 50% in the app. Once a battery drains down to 50%, the Jackery would then begin to pull power from the grid and will keep the battery at least 50% charged for emergencies. Also, if the grid were to go down, the batteries would still charge with solar. So in this example, the AC wall socket is more of a backup to solar. If the grid were to go down, the battery would take over. All right, let's talk about the third aspect of the system, the price. Whole home backup systems, whether a full solar and battery setup or a gas standby generator system, can cost between $10,000 and $20,000 starting out. And going this route also requires permitting, which takes time. So where the system fits in is an introductory system that requires little upfront investment compared to a larger system. Now, while it's not as powerful, it can still power the basics. Again, I realize this unit is not cheap, but compared to other options, it is. For example, on this channel several months ago, I reviewed the Jackery 5000 Plus. Now that unit is specifically designed for a whole home backup power. It's a very expandable system with a much higher price tag. It would require an electrician to integrate it into your home fully. Now this unit, however, cannot be expanded and is not as powerful as a 5000, but that's the point. It's a more accessible system for those new to home energy backup, want something that doesn't require a permanent installation or don't have a large budget, but still want to be able to back up the basics or tie it into their critical load panel as we covered earlier. In summary, I think it's a great introduction to a home backup power system if you want the basic features of a more expensive unit. Specs and features. Okay, now that we've covered what makes this unit unique, let's review the specs and features. For AC output, it can handle 3,600 watts continuous and up to 7,200 watt surge. That's plenty for simultaneously powering a refrigerator, lights, Wi-Fi router, phone chargers, and a few other small devices. Now regarding the battery size, it has a 3,072 watt hour battery, and Jackery says that's enough to power a refrigerator for 1 to 2 days, and that seems accurate based on my early testing, which we'll cover momentarily. With solar, it can go even longer. If this is plugged into the grid and the power goes out, it can switch over in under 20 milliseconds from grid to battery. That means your devices won't even blink during a blackout, which is important for those with sensitive medical devices. And this is where the unit really stands out. You can set it up for power arbitrage, as we detailed earlier in the video, charging the battery during off-peak hours when rates are low, and then using the stored energy during peak pricing, like 4 to 9 p.m. in the evening. Again, these are features that can be configured in the app, and you can connect it to both solar and the grid at the same time. The Jackery prioritizes solar charging, but if the battery drops below a limit you define in the app, it's going to switch over to grid power. And if the grid fails, it immediately draws from the battery. No manual intervention is required. It weighs 61.5 pounds, which is pretty light for a 3 kilowatt hour battery system. And regarding solar charging, it can accept up to 1,000 watts of solar input. You can power it with 2 of their Solar Sega 500 watt panels or 4 of their Solar Sega 400 watt panels. Now, additionally, you can buy 8mm to MC4 adapters to use your own solar panels. It also has zero drain technology, meaning it will retain 95% of its charge after 365 days in storage. And it utilizes CTB or cell-to-body EV battery technology, which EV manufacturers are now using to make them more space efficient and long-lasting. Additionally, it has Charge Shield 2.0, which constantly monitors temperature to ensure safety charging for enhanced safety and performance. Test results. Now let's talk about how it performed in real-world usage. Regarding the setup, it can be operational in a matter of minutes, just right out of the box. And I plugged it into my critical load panel, powering the refrigerator, internet, lighting, and a few other outlets without any issue. I ran a consistent 1800 watt load for AC efficiency over a few hours. After I drained the battery down, we had an output of 2.79 kilowatt hours, which for a battery this size means that it has a 91% efficiency. On these types of devices, if they get around 85% efficiency on AC, that's a solid number. So 91% is obviously above average. Regarding AC idle consumption, to test this out, we left the AC on without a load sitting for 24 hours. And in this time, it consumed 22% of the battery. So that means it used 676 watts in 24 hours without a load on it, meaning that it requires 28 watts per hour, which is slightly better than average for an inverter that can output 3,600 watts. For a UPS switchover test, I have this powering my PC and monitor while plugged into a wall socket. Testing it on a PC is a great option as they require a switchover in under 20 milliseconds, otherwise they just shut off. To test the UPS functionality, we can simulate a grid outage by unplugging it from the AC source. And as you can see here, my monitor didn't flicker and the PC continued to run without issue. For the final test, I powered what most people will likely use this for. In January of this year, when LA caught on fire, which is only an hour away from where I'm located, our local power company began shutting off the power in select locations when the winds kicked up to ensure no fires were started. Now, I ended up helping several of my neighbors by providing them with solar generators. Want to know the first thing they wanted to power when I came over and set it up? You guessed it, the refrigerators. So I plugged the unit into my refrigerator for 24 hours without being plugged into the grid. And I used a kilowatt meter to see how much the fridge pulled, and in that time, it was 1.13 kilowatt hours. Now, earlier I spoke about this unit's idle AC consumption efficiency, so the Jackery used roughly 680 watt hours during those 24 hours. Now, between the AC idle consumption and the amount the refrigerator used, it used a total of 1.81 kilowatt hours over 24 hours, or roughly about 59% of the battery. So you can expect to power a refrigerator for about 36 hours for an average refrigerator in average room temperature conditions. And if connected to solar, you can extend that time. Obviously, if your refrigerator is smaller or the room is cooler, it's going to last longer. ROI. Within the preparedness community, there are some products that you can buy that you may or may not use. I've reviewed my fair share of these devices over the years, and still they're increasingly getting more advanced, like this unit, where you can integrate it into your daily needs, as we detailed earlier in the first point, discussing how to offset your power bill. Additionally, this Jackery HomePower 3000 actually qualifies for the Residential Clean Energy Credit, a federal incentive in the United States that gives up to 30% back in tax credits when paired with solar. And this includes the unit itself, any Jackery solar panels that you purchase with it, and installation costs if you integrate it into your home energy systems. And I'll post a link below to Jackery's official page where you can learn more about how to apply for this rebate. Now, full disclosure, you need to review this and understand its rebate terms, as it's often based on your income. But it is worth considering how much you're ultimately paying for a system like this and whether it qualifies for discounts. And this is not tax advice. So before making a decision based on what I've detailed, I would encourage you to explore this more with a tax professional. Now, having said that, let's consider the practical savings when you offset your power needs with solar. This unit can accept 1,000 watts of solar input, and with a 1,000 watt solar setup, which is also tax deductible, paired with this unit, you could produce between 850 to 1,500 kilowatt hours of electricity annually, depending on your location, your panel efficiency, and sunlight exposure. That's a significant offset to your utility bill, especially when combined with the smart charging behaviors that we detailed above. Where I live, I pay about 30 cents a kilowatt hour during off-peak hours, so with a 1,000 watt solar setup powering this, I could save about $450 per year. Now, the battery is roughly rated for 10 years of daily use, so it would pay for itself in about 4 years with 6 years of life left in it. Additionally, if I use the power arbitrage feature detailed in the first point, I can speed up that timeline to pay off the device sooner than later by shaving the electricity usage during peak hours. All right, so let's quickly run through the numbers to give you an example. If you utilize a tax rebate of 30%, that would take the cost from $2,000 to $1,400. If I have a 1,000 watt solar array, as I pointed out earlier, I could produce roughly $450 worth of electricity each year. And let's say I use the full battery, which is 3 kilowatt hours during peak hours. Now, during peak, I pay 60 cents per kilowatt hour, but if I use the battery to power critical loads, I could cut my electricity costs in half during those peak hours, which would save me close to about 90 cents a day and about $328 per year. So with $450 in savings per year with solar and about $328 by using the peak load shedding feature, I'm saving about $700 to $800 per year. So in effect, the system would pay for itself roughly within about 2 years. Since the battery is rated to 80% capacity over 10 years, you would profit well past 8 years. Of course, those are my numbers based on my cost, but if you run the numbers using the approach that I described, you can determine how long it would take you to save money if you implemented this into your power setup. Final thoughts. Okay, so this review is a bit different than the typical solar generator reviews I've done in the past, and this unit definitely is a bit different in its capabilities and design. In short, it's designed to be an introductory home backup unit with practical everyday applications at a competitive price point. Now, regarding the specs and how it performed when testing it, everything checks out and is pretty standard, in most cases a little above average. So here's my final thoughts. If you're looking for a quiet, maintenance-free, always on standby backup solution for blackouts, a way to cut electricity costs using time of use energy planning, or a solar compatible backup that won't take up a ton of space and can be integrated into your critical load panel for 120 volt devices, then this unit may be the right fit for you. Additionally, I would encourage you to run the numbers as I did in the previous point, as you can determine when a unit like this would actually pay for itself. And look, I'll be honest, this unit, it did kind of surprise me. When I first received it in the box, it appeared like some of the other units that I've reviewed before. But after testing it out and really learning the features, I would say that this is a strong contender. And I think this is the main takeaway from this video. It's a strong contender for an introductory home backup power source. It's compact and intelligent, and it doesn't require a degree in electrical engineering to get it up and running. Just plug it in, configure the app, and you're ready to go. And this is one of the things that Jackery is known for, simplicity and ease of use. One other feature that I'm beginning to point out in these types of reviews is the brand. I'm beginning to see companies I've worked with in the past begin to go under. One in particular is closing its doors this month. And Jackery is easily among the top 2 solar generator companies in the world by volume, so they're not going anywhere. And with this device, they get a 5-year warranty. So if you're interested in checking out this unit and picking up one, use my special link and code in the description for a limited time deal during the launch window. Let me know in the comments, what's the first appliance you'd want to power with a unit like this if there was a blackout? If you have any questions or feedback, feel free to post them below. And as always, stay safe out there.